Welcome to Business World's B-Side podcast. I'm Patricia Mirasol, a multimedia producer at Business World. In this episode, I speak with Carl M. Javier, Chief AI Ethicist and Executive Director at Data and AI Ethics PH. We delve into the ethical dimensions of artificial intelligence, discussing how this disruptive technology influences human dignity and the common good. We also dwell on its inherent challenges and risks of misuse.
Today, we will be talking about artificial intelligence or AI and ethics, and whether AI enhances or diminishes human dignity. For the record, perhaps you can share a bit about what Data and Ethics PH is and what you do there as a Chief AI Ethicist and Executive Director.
Hi, thanks for inviting me onto the show, Patricia. So Data and AI Ethics PH is an advocacy organization right now. We're a bunch of volunteers that feel very passionately that data ethics and AI ethics need to be approached very thoughtfully, with different angles, with different representations, so that we can ensure that the incredibly fast adoption of these technologies is beneficial, is equitable, and ideally leads to this term called human flourishing that they like to throw around. We, up until earlier this year, we were called Data Ethics PH, and we added on the Data and AI Ethics, one, because I joined the team, but two, because data ethics and AI ethics are inextricably linked, but they are two different fields of ethical study.
I didn't know that data ethics is different from AI ethics. Can you differentiate the two?
Sure. So, for example, the ethical collection and deployment of data is one thing. So, for example, when when an organization asks you for your information, they have a data privacy commitment that is made to you. So, when there are data leaks and things, those are actually violations of our data privacy. But that is not necessarily AI ethics. So, for example, we take a bunch of data and we build an AI system with it, say your internal company system, but actually that data was obtained unethically. Then, even though you may have implemented your AI system ethically, there's still questions. So there's different ways to go about it. And then there's also the basic thing of when you deploy an AI system, was that deployed in an ethical manner? So they're closely interrelated because AI doesn't exist without data, right? AI needs massive amounts of data to function. So there's multiple levels of ethical query that we need to make as we begin to adopt these systems.
You mentioned multiple layers of deliberation and consideration before we can say that we actually deployed AI ethically. Let's start first with the good. AI as a technology is very disruptive. We already all know that. And it's good in both good and bad. And it's disruptive in both good and bad ways. Let's start with the good. How can AI potentially promote human dignity and the common good?
Right. That's so huge, though, the human dignity and the common good. But I think on a base layer, if you're using AI as a personal assistant, I use it sometimes almost as a creative partner. So it's almost like if we imagine when we started having notebooks, like we were able to essentially, the notebook is an external hard drive for us that we could build up memory. And then this is just like multitudes of information more than that. And the sense that you actually have access to, and again, prefaced with whether ethically obtained or not, you have access to pretty much the entire human knowledge, unfortunately, possibly filtered through the internet, which has its own issues. That's one. And then depending on how it was obtained, whether ethically or not. But once you have this tool in your hands, there are so many things that you can do with it. That's one. Another thing is that it actually helps people who are not as skilled at something in doing that thing. And when I say that, it's like when I used to run a podcast company, I could edit, audio, but it would take me double the time as someone who was a legit audio editor. When we started implementing AI-powered audio editing software, what happened was, one, I could use text-based editing to do initial passes so that I could approach it as me as a storyteller. That's one. Two, you working in podcasting, the ums and the inhales and those things are sometimes unbearable with certain interviews, and you have to remove every single one. If I'm an audio editor and I don't have to do that, that leaves me more space to be creative, add music, more editing, or possibly make more episodes or whatever else. If it advances with robotics, with all of these like sci-fi things that can be imagined, the ability, for example, even now, just the ability to connect neural networks, like human brain networks, to AI interfaces, so that, say, someone with a stroke can communicate in ways that they were not able to before. These are things that we are starting to look at as near future possibilities. So there's these great things that might come about if we build it right, if the intentions for it are correct, and sort of the incentive structures are also in place.
AI is often talked about like it's a panacea for all society's ills. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? What are the limitations of AI when it comes to its benefits?
Well, I think one is that part of that narrative or the conversations around how it's going to fix everything is really driven by these valuations. But on one level, and admittedly, like I have a background in writing science fiction, so I'm very drawn to these ideas of super intelligence and what could happen. And but when they make promises, when I say the big tech companies, they make promises like, once we have super intelligence, it's gonna solve cancer and it will solve the climate problem and all of these things, right? And the thing is like, yeah, but when is that? And how long do we have to solve the climate crisis? That's the problem, is that once people use an LLM for the first time, and because they've never interfaced with something like this before, it really feels magical. But it's that sci-fi quote, right? Like, advanced science feels like magic to someone who doesn't understand it. But once you understand it, these are probability machines. LLMs are probability machines, and they will make mistakes and they will have hallucinations and all this stuff. So once you start factoring all of that in, then you can have a better grasp of it. Because right now, there's a lot of incentive for hype. As a long-term goal, super intelligence might be possible, but we need to look at the short term here, which is that AI systems are being developed for warfare. Super big problem, right? What are the regulations about deployment of warfare, surveillance, all of these things that actually will impact the Philippines in the very near future, because we do have hostile forces developing incredibly powerful AI systems.
What you said is actually related to my next question. We have a lot of challenges surrounding the development of AI. For instance, I read an opinion piece that said that AI can in fact exacerbate inequality, and that in the near future, it's the ones who own the technology that will have all the power. So
Yes.
Can you expound on that further?
So on one super simple level, it's one term that's used is digital divide. And so this sense that there will be quote unquote winners and losers, right? Some of this AI race is being framed as an arms race, and whoever develops the most powerful AI can be in the lead. And I think we don't have to look too far. All we need to do is we look at the pandemic, and we look at how far behind certain children fell in their education because some kids had internet and devices and room in their home to have their own classes, as opposed to they're in one room together, nagsisiksikan yung mga magkakapatid to access their education. on the international levels of development, Yuval Noah Harari calls it the Silicon Curtain. So it's like you're dividing the world by those who have powerful and non-powerful AI. So multiple levels of possible disadvantaging, which we also again need to address. That's why I keep using the term equitable development of these technologies, right? Because like if you read the OpenAI statements, they're saying that they want to build super intelligence so that everyone can benefit from it. But what does that benefit look like when the current structures of Silicon Valley companies is the way that it is, where you have these, they're literally burning $500 million. That's the projection. They're burning about 500 million, like $500 million a month on developing their next generation models. And sure, they've gotten investment to do that, but imagine what could be done with $500 million elsewhere in the world in solving other problems.
There's a lot of food for thought there. Yeah, like what you said about the multiple levels of possible disadvantaging.
Mm-hmm.
And right now I'm thinking, where is the Philippines in this AI race?
Where are we?
If in Silicon Valley they are spending $500 million a month, where are we now? We're still at the point where we're trying to give internet access to everyone in the country.
Yeah. Ano pa tayo? Connection issues. But when I say $500 million, that's only OpenAI.
Oh my gosh.
That's only one company that's burning that much money every month. And then you've got all of the people building foundational models. And then you saw this new Meta AI initiative where they're shifting their focus and putting really big investments on it. And so when people are throwing around that much money, that doesn't happen out of the goodness of their hearts, right? There is some expectation of some value return. And how are they going to extract that value? Imagine if what happened to social media happens again here with AI, where we are again left as consumers. They just take our data. The value of our data in individuals, for us, the value of our individual data is so low, but the value of big data in aggregate is so high, right? But we're not getting that much of that value. What are we getting? We're getting free social media, which really is it a net positive?
I'm so glad you mentioned social media because I was thinking about that also. In line with that, I want to mention OpenAI's June 2025 report about the malicious uses of AI. The report identifies several categories of malicious AI use, including social engineering, scams, and child exploitation. The report also mentions that AI was used in the Philippines for content analysis, comment generation, and PR materials that support President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Any thoughts on that?
One is, it's like they didn't even try. Parang, guys, naka free plan ba kayo at kitang-kita ng OpenAI ang ginagawa nyo? But that's the thing is, people are so focused on these outputs. They're so focused on, oh, look at this AI video. Sabi na fake, ganyan. But when you look at this report, they're using it for strategy. They're using it for content creation on multiple levels. So they're using it for the comments and things like that. And that should make us worry about what the information ecosystem looks like for us. Even more recently, I'm sure you saw this, was it just yesterday? Yung umikot naman yung video against Sara Duterte's, VP Sara Duterte's impeachment na AI generated din, na shared by a senator. And people are like, oh, kung yung AI naloloko si Bato o ganyan. It's like, no, that's also understanding like how people work. And I think that's one of the things is we keep pinning these things on AI, and AI is incredibly powerful, but it is a tool. There are people figuring out how to use this. And so on the side of good, I suppose, if we want to say, on the side of ethical behavior, we need to understand how it's being used and what are the measures that can come into play. And we need to be working with these companies and finding some level of leverage. And again, babalik ako dun sa individual versus aggregate. Like for example, individual artists, paano ka lalaban sa sobrang laki? But if you begin to organize and you come together as collectives, and we actually have supportive government that will allow us to negotiate against these big tech companies that may be taking advantage of us. What would that look like if we were in cooperation with our government?
But I just want to point out that I also liked what was said in the OpenAI report, because the company said that the use of AI by threat actors paradoxically also helped OpenAI identify them and disrupt their threat quickly. So yeah, so that's also a flip side of the use of AI, right? You can use it for bad, you can use it for good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my inspiration actually for this topic is Pope Francis, especially when I heard that the late pontiff used the term technocratic paradigm to describe a mindset where technology and efficiency are treated as the highest values, often at the expense of human values.
Yes.
So my question is, how do we create a future where people still see themselves as human beings and not as data points, and where a society still practices compassion and isn't just entirely guided by efficiency?
It's really rooted in labor, and it's not even rooted in an AI conversation. What it's rooted in really is value of work, and how an individual laborer is viewed only with so much value versus companies or corporations have such bigger value. And we've been able to justify that bigger value because of the need for companies to organize and so on and so forth. But again, so one of the things that we say sa data and AI ethics is AI problems are actually human problems. So the problem of, say, valuation and human dignity isn't rooted in AI. It's rooted in management philosophies developed in the 20th century, right? How many hours is a person working, and what is their efficiency rating, and how can we make this assembly line more efficient? And the assembly line by itself as something that built high efficiency but dehumanization. And the further along we go, we lose specializations, and then we become that's why like a lot of the reasons why people burn out, and as I say, I'm just another cog in the machine. It's a dehumanizing factor. And so one of the things that's happening now is you see the companies rushing into AI because they want to get rid of certain workers and certain levels of labor. And so I don't think that we should be using AI to get rid of jobs. We should be using AI to offload tasks. So it goes back to what I was saying earlier. These are things that as a person who's incredibly skilled, talented, creative, so on and so forth, if you can remove those things from them, would that unleash up possibilities for them, because they're not tied down by things? If your job is super boring, what if we're able to automate those things away, and then you're able to go and do something better, more meaningful to you? And that's the question becomes, if the labor workforce shifts and so much labor becomes inessential, how do we create meaningful pursuits and work? But we only get there if we actually build out equitable systems right now that will get us to there.
Okay, so that's the key, I guess, building equitable systems so we could get to a future where we create more meaningful pursuits.
Yes.
Okay. I've also read somewhere that the Philippines should explore the idea of creating an AI institution, which is a set of guiding principles to make sure that AI is helpful, harmless, and honest. So if the Philippines were to create an AI institution, how should we go about this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I want to acknowledge that a lot of people are making attempts towards this. Like you can see unfortunately, I think a lot of the bills that were filed in the last session have already expired. Ethics PH was asked to give comment and our input for this, and hopefully, it was taken warmly naman. We hope to push it forward, but it's not one institution. We think there needs to be two parallel institutions. One is focused on education and engineering. So we have a four E's framework. So education, engineering, ethics, and enforcement. So we split those into two sides. No, yung education and engineering, that's the advancing AI, moving it forward. So you're educating your people, but the engineering side is figuring out what systems to build, how to implement, how to move us forward. And so this is the side that is tasked with innovation. And then on the other side is the responsibility and safety side. So it's the ethics and the enforcement. So, and obviously ethics questions, and then enforcement being cyber, and actually once you come up with the ethics, how do you get people to comply with those ethical standards? And the challenge being that it takes a long time to pass laws, but with the way that the technology is evolving, we're going to need institutions that keep evolving as fast or somewhere near as fast as this does.
What is the role of business and the private sector when it comes to ensuring ethics is incorporated in the development of AI?
The interesting thing is when I try to start the ethics conversations, we can't have them yet because they're still at the level of what is AI and how would I use it and all of that stuff. So I talk about it very similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where because people are still grappling with what is it and what can I use it for, you can't get them to think that much about the ethics of it yet. But once they start using it and they start seeing the limitations and the challenges and what effects it might have. And so I think that businesses need to, one, understand, right? My intuition is, especially with the numbers that we see, businesses are not adopting them, in a systematic manner or with clear AI policies and principles in play. So in the same way that your company should have a gender policy, and your company should have an environmental policy, and your company should have a data privacy policy, your company needs to have an AI policy. And unlike some of those, where you write it and it's probably good until you run into a new problem, your AI policy will need to continually be updated. I would say between 3 to 6 months, there needs to be a review and update of that AI policy as all of this stuff goes forward. Because I don't think that business owners, leaders understand the level of threat that they are under if they don't have an AI policy and their team is using AI. You could wind up like this. What happened with the company that OpenAI found, which is that they probably compromised some of their data and some of their client data. Kaya sila nahuli. So understanding those limits and setting up those limits, that's actually ethical activity. And so, some people might want to wait until there's proper regulation, but I do recommend that if you figure out what your ethical standards are, then you wait for the regulation to catch up to you, as opposed to waiting for regulation, then just building for compliance.
So if you were a CISO of a multinational, that's what you would do. You'd already start crafting your AI policy and then just wait for government regulation to catch up.
Yeah. Because in all likelihood, if you're building ethically, then you will probably be above the minimum compliance already.
And I also read on LinkedIn that Data and Ethics PH, a Data and Ethics AI PH, was part of the group that helped craft the Global AI Safety Report 2025, if I read correctly.
Yeah,
Can you tell me a
correct.
little bit more about the said report?
Sure, that's our co-founder and technologist, Doc Ligot. So he was one of hundreds, I think, something close to 300 authors of this report. And the focus is AI safety. So for terminology's sake, there's like AI philosophy, there's AI ethics. AI ethics leads to AI safety, and there's responsible AI. So they're not necessarily interchangeable, but they're different sort of overlapping disciplines of thinking about AI. Obviously, yung philosophy is kind of the higher order, what is the future of humanity kind of stuff. Ethics is a little more grounded in terms of how it's being applied. Safety is concerned with both. The key thought for that paper, for that report, is there's three levels that we want to be looking at AI safety, like malicious actors using AI. So yun yung one, like, using AI to hack into other systems, mga ganyan. Compromising cybersecurity of other nations or companies. So that's one. Two is AI misbehaving, AI systems that could go wrong. So it's basically like, system failures, AI systems that go rogue. There are also instances of like AI systems that will try to replicate itself so that it can't be deleted. Those kinds of problems. So human threat actors, misbehaving and misaligned AI. And then the top level is the social impacts. So again, like, if this AI is deployed, will it be used for surveillance to oppress a certain population, which we've seen done? And yung surveillance and oppression, those can be like super minuscule. For example, Kai Fu Lee and I'm forgetting the other person, but they write this story in AI 2041 of just credit scoring, and sort of credit scoring being a new way of classifying and stratifying, or in their story, it reinforces social stratifications. Biggest AI usage for the Philippines recently, I think, is the NCAP. Diba? So they used, computer vision to catch all of those people. And then, like 1 week later, diba, ang daming reklamo, and they're like, well, we've invalidated half of those reports. So ano yun? 8,000 something in a huli. And then something like 4,000 were invalidated by human review. So, paano yan? Human pa rin naman yung nag-review. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing those three levels of AI safety. I think that the ideas of having a system that goes rogue and a technology that reinforces social stratification are scary.
The possibilities are almost endless if we are implementing it properly.
And that's a challenge, how to implement it properly and push the world into using tech for good.
Yes. Also because like the current world order that we're living in, diba, it's so, it's trending in such a negative place. But maybe at some point we figure out that maybe this trend is wrong.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Okay. Hopefully.
Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Carl, and for sharing your thoughts about AI, ethics, and human dignity.
Artificial intelligence can promote human dignity by, among others, potentially freeing us from menial tasks and allowing for more meaningful work. It can, however, also be used maliciously as well as exacerbate human inequality. There is a critical need for responsible AI. Societies need to build equitable systems to ensure human flourishing. This has been another episode of B-Side. Subscribe now and enjoy industry insights on Philippine business and beyond.